25 years ago next month, Crown Heights became a national story, the site of clashes between blacks and Jews, touched off by the death of a young boy and resulting in the death of a young man. When the cameras left, efforts to promote reconciliation began. Now, we've just seen in the video, Crown Heights is the scene for new tension between longtime residents and property owners over the gentrification of the area. Here to talk with us about the riots, their aftermath, and today's reality in Crown Heights are Roger Greene, founder and CEO of the Crown Heights Youth Collective. Hello, sir.
How are you doing?
Rabbi Mordechai Lightstone from the Chabad-Lubavitch organization. Thanks for coming on.
How are you?
And Maura Ewing, a freelance journalist. Welcome, Maura. Richard, let's start with you. You were on the ground a quarter century ago. Obviously, a quarter century ago in July was the prelude to the riots that would occur in August. At that time, did it feel like something was brewing? Did it feel like a major outbreak of violence was possible?
Well, we felt that at any given time in Crown Heights, there were needs for us to begin to really take a more serious look at dialogue, a more serious look at combining folks together. So we'd been doing things together with the community going back into the 80s. We were working with a group, Hasidics that were coming out of Eastern Europe. We started doing work with them. But 1991, the mayor then, David Dinkins, had put together a real major program called Safe Street, Safe City. And we were working, my wife and I, Dr. Maura, was working with that program, and we had gotten over 100 young people in a leadership training program. And it's literally, we know we would need them a month later, but we trained them the whole entire month of June into July. And then what happened in August, those same young people, we were able to bring back into the streets of Crown Heights to help to quell the things that were happening.
What did cause the unrest to be as bad as it was? This particular incident, how did this get magnified into these 3 days of violence?
Well, miscommunications. First of all, the fact that the names and folks had began to say that the ambulance had left a young black child, which was not the fact. The fact was, and information had to be brought out, the fact that the ambulance that was there from the Hatzalah ambulance was called a BLS ambulance, basic life support. What the young boy, Gavin Cato, needed was an ALS ambulance, advanced life support. 9 minutes from the time the accident took place, there was one on the scene, and the police department had told the ambulance to take the young Hasidic youths away, let the ALS come in and take care of the child, the two children who had been injured. And that information wasn't brought out. And when things get out there like that, folks began to become very antsy about the situation. And that caused a lot of the incidents, which also led again, some hours later, not even hours later, to Yankel Rosenbaum being stabbed to death on President and Brooklyn Avenue.
So Mordechai, we know what happened after that. And I know you weren't on the scene at the time, but in your community today, this is obviously a significant anniversary. Why is it significant? Why does this event stand out in people's memories?
It's a good question. I mean, speaking as a resident of Crown Heights for the past 10 years, before that I was in Los Angeles, I think it's a chance to go forward. I mean, Richard had mentioned earlier in kind of the conversation beforehand that when you have a crisis, it's the chance to build bridges and create more communication and move forward and kind of address maybe underlying issues and hopefully bring healing to everyone.
Maura, you have done some reporting on Crown Heights, and I'm curious, you were looking at Crown Heights of today. When you did that reporting in 2013 and 14, were the riots and the unrest of '91 on people's minds, or had they slipped into the distant past?
So it was interesting. I think a few months prior to when we started reporting, the New York Times had done a story about gentrification in the area. And they sort of posited that it was different than other neighborhoods because it was on this scarred land of racial tensions. And we didn't really find that to be the case. We thought what made it unique was how rapidly it was gentrifying. But most of the tensions that people talked about, I should say too, we were on the non-Hasidic side of Crown Heights, was where we did our reporting. And the tensions were more between the new residents and the long-term residents, rather than the Hasidic community and the black community.
So after the riots concluded, there were efforts at reconciliation or further efforts. What did those look like?
Well, we went right to work, Dr. Laz, myself, my program. I've been in Crown Heights now. We've been running a youth program since 1978. So we had a sort of a foundation program already, and then we began to reach out to the Hasidic. Many of the things that happened in Crown Heights was because we were like two ships passing each other in the night. No one knew each other. And when we sat young people around the table, like him and I are sitting here, and he's asking me questions about why is it that this happens, and I'm asking him questions. And before long, we began communications, and it led to Project CARE, which is a program that's been on since 24 years now, the year after Crown Heights. And we're going to be meeting together with that group for the 25th anniversary of the commemorating the growth in Crown Heights. 'Cause I have to say, it's been a growing process. Communications, our metrics have been able to allow us to talk to each other. We will not ever get to that point again where things are happening and we're not talking to one another. And that's what happened in 1991.
Mordechai, how would you characterize relations in the neighborhood now between the Hasidic community and the African-American community?
Actually, I had an interesting personal experience. Recently moved in Crown Heights. We had been on President Utica. We moved a little bit further north, and it's my understanding that we're the first Jewish family to move on that particular block in some time now. And right away, there was a block party the next week after we moved in, and one of my neighbors came over and said that we got some kosher food for you guys, and that we really want you to be part of this community. And the understanding between the both of us when we spoke is that really we are one community. It's the Lubavitch Rebbe said it's not two sides, it's really one community. And especially with all the dynamics and changes happening now in Crown Heights, kind of from other people moving in, I think the fact that when we come together as longtime residents, it really is, it's an important thing, really, to be a solidified force.
And that's an important point you made about the Rebbe saying one Crown Heights, not two. I had a chance to meet the Rebbe right after, and gave me $1. Called me back and gave me another $1 because he heard the things that we were doing.
Interesting.
Yeah, right.
So let's talk about the more recent dynamics, and Maura, you're reporting on that. The New York Times said in that article you referred to, I think, that Crown Heights 2000-2010 lost about 14% of its African-American residents. What was driving that, or what is driving that in Crown Heights?
So, I mean, that was sort of the question that we were seeking to answer, and, if you saw our article, it's very long because there wasn't really a simple answer. But I think a few things happened. I think, first of all, it's kind of surprising that gentrification hadn't come sooner to that area. It's beautiful part of Brooklyn. The public transportation is like the best in the borough. You have like 4 lines going right there. It's near to Prospect Park. It's super residential friendly, or pedestrian friendly, sorry. But in the past had a lot of problems with violence. And I think that what happened was there was sort of like a slow trickle of gentrification, and then it sort of hit a tipping point, was our understanding. And once it hit that point of, enough diversity, enough newcomers, the police started paying more attention, and that's sort of a checkered people. There's different theories on when they came in and out, that sort of thing. But certainly in 2009, after there was a series of shootings, there was the NYPD really focused heavily on this one avenue, really. And I think as that happened, predatory landlording also started really ticking up. Displacement became a big issue, whether that was by buying people out of their apartments or sort of forcibly removing them through neglect. And so I think all of those things just kind of snowballed into a really quick gentrification, much quicker, I think, than the borough had seen in other neighborhoods.
Mordechai, how do you feel about that and people in the Hasidic community? As is the case in a lot of neighborhoods around the city, and especially Brooklyn, the character might be changing, is changing before your eyes. Is that a good thing? Is that a threat? How do you feel?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think with everything, it's kind of a mixed blessing. There are nice sides. There are, wonderful stores that are opening up. There are, there's a drop in crime, things like that. On the other hand, I mean, personally, I see in my peer group, when I speak to kind of the millennial Hasidic population, much like I think with our Caribbean American, African American peers, there's a sense of displacement that the rents have just gone sky high, and it's very, very difficult for people to live here. I mean, I have friends who've moved out either to other states or to upstate New York or different places, because to stay and live in Crown Heights today on a working middle class income, which I think is the majority of the population there, is just incredibly difficult. And that's actually kind of frustrated me personally when I look at the coverage, not Maura's reporting, but in other places, the Times, WNYC, different things that speak about the changes in Crown Heights. I feel like our narrative is left out. That doesn't mean that the other stories, that of our neighbors, isn't important. It's critical that their story be told as well. But that in the sense of the Hasidic community, the fact there is to a certain degree a lot of pressure on us to be able to stay in our community, that's been almost radio silent, and it's been kind of frustrating on my own end. So.
Well, the point is that the other part is educating the community. The mayor has come up, the new mayor here has come up with a whole plan about helping people getting displaced, homelessness, getting rents paid and things like that. And I think that type of education, I think your council does a lot of work with that. We do a lot of work. We're just referring people to the needs with the attorneys, the city funds to help people pay in their rent. That was sort of silent for a minute, and we're doing a lot of work now to push that information out there to folks and attempt to not say quell the move, but to kind of like mix it up to the sense we says change is good. However, like I think the president has a great statement. He says all ships rise in high tide. We want to let all our ships rise in the community as this tide comes in. And I think it's important for the information to get out there to people, that they are not forced to be evicted. If there's monies there that the mayor has set aside and the council has set aside for this project, it just have to be given to the people. The information has to be gotten to the people.
Maura, one of the questions your piece asks, and it's an important one for the whole city, is it possible to see improvement in a neighborhood, better streetscape, lower crime, and have incumbent residents, whether they are Hasidic or Black or anyone else, be able to stay if they want to? Right. Crown Heights might be a great example of that question. Did anybody have a sufficient answer as to whether that's possible or not?
I was afraid you were going to ask this question. I don't think there is a clear answer. As we were chatting about earlier, I think home ownership plays a big role in this, when people can, turn their homes into an asset also and benefit from the change in the neighborhood. Beyond that, I mean, I would love to throw that question to both.
Well, let me open it for a final question to our two other guests. We're at a point in our country where there's a lot of talk about race relations, about policing, two themes that obviously were at play in Crown Heights. Do you think there are lessons from what happened 25 years ago that we can apply more broadly to what's going on in our country?
I mean, from my personal understanding of things, it feels like definitely I think increased communication between all people, and at least in terms on the community level, not necessarily on the kind of the policy level, I think is really, really important. When we get to know each other, get to know our neighbors, and get to see the things that bind us together and so many things we have in common, that's a really, really powerful thing.
Well, we have improved. After Crown Heights, if you remember, there was Washington Heights, there was South Central LA. There were major issues, and we used the model. I would get calls as soon as these issues happened to get out to the streets, to get out to Washington Heights, to get the young people crossing the bridge. Most recently, a day before the incident took place in Dallas, I spoke to 500 new cops coming out the academy. We did the orientation for them. Literally, we know that a day later this issue would happen. And one of the things we spoke about was continue this marriage between the police department and the community. When those young officers get out into the streets, they're going to get out there. And yeah, there'll be heroes and sheroes, but more important, you'll be a good individual. You'll be a good police officer. You'll know the people in your community. And you'll understand how important it is for us to broker these marriages.
I want to ask you about the anniversary itself. You were mentioning there are some commemorative events planned. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, we're going to be doing something at the Brooklyn Jewish Children's Museum. Devorah Haberstein and myself will be bringing the political people in early that morning. And then from there, we're going to be going up to the Brooklyn Museum, the Children's Museum on Brooklyn Avenue. And we'll be having a day where people will be able to come together. It's not a celebration, it's a commemoration of people coming together to just meet each other again, to know each other as, you know, your neighbors met up with you. We want to meet up the new people in there because a lot of the young people were babies or weren't even born yet. Crown Heights is now history to most of them. We want them to understand that this continuum is going to be happening. And the media is they play a very key role in it. So if they could come out there and just kind of show the other parts of it, of what's good happening in this great community of ours. As you said, Crown Heights is the crown jewel of our city. And we're going to be making sure, I've been in this neighborhood since the Dodgers were here. So I have a very special, all my children were raised there. And I have a very special feeling about Crown Heights and about Brooklyn. So we're going to be doing everything here for, if we get together again 25 years from now, the 50th anniversary, that we'll be talking about even greater things that take place, better things.
All right, it's a day 2066. We'll all be right back here
Yes.
to discuss it, hopefully. Well, thank you all very much for coming and being part of this, and hope it's an excellent commemoration.